Today we're going to be talking about percents, decimals, and fractions. The first thing we need to know is that percents are always out of 100. So we're going to focus on first turning decimals into percentages. Whenever you're talking about percentages, you're always going to move the decimal 2 times. But when you're turning a decimal into percent, you're going to move the decimal 2 times to the right. So your first example is the decimal 759 thousandths. So we're going to move that decimal 2 times to the right. So our percentage would be 75 and 9/10%. The decimal 1 and 2/10. So this decimal is more than a whole. So that tells me that my percentage is going to be more than 100%. So again, we move it 2 spots to the right. We add a 0 as a placeholder. So we would get 120%. The decimal 5/100ths. It's a really small decimal, so that tells me I'm going to get a really small percentage. So I move the decimal 2 spots to the right, so my decimal would be 5%. Now I'm going to talk about turning percents into decimals. So again, we know we're talking about percents. We know we're going to move the decimal 2 spots. But since we're turning a percent back to a decimal, we're going to move it 2 spots to the left. So the percentage, 85%. The decimal comes at the end, so we move it 2 spots to the left, 85/100ths. So it's a percent that is less than 100%, so my decimal should be less than 1 whole. 103%. Decimal comes at the end, move it 2 spots to the left, 1 300. Since it's more than 100%, I should have a decimal that's more than 1 whole. Very small percentage is going to tell me that I'm going to have a really small decimal. So again, the decimal comes at the end, move it 2 spots to the left, add a 0 as a placeholder, and we would get 3/100ths. Now we're going to talk about turning fractions or percents into fractions. In order to do that, it's very important that we remember that percents are always out of 100. So the percent, 85%. So if I have to write this as a fraction, I'm going to write the percentage out of 100. And then I want to simplify. So I'm going to reduce the top and the bottom by 5. So this reduces down to 17/20ths. %12.5%. Need to write that as a fraction. So again, percents are always out of 100. So we write 12.5 over 100. But it's never proper to leave a decimal within a fraction. So that means we have to get rid of that decimal. In order to get rid of it, we have to move it 1 time to the right. So whenever I'm moving decimals, that's like the same thing as multiplying by 10 if I'm moving a decimal to the right. So if I only need to move the decimal to the right 1 time to get rid of it, that means I have to multiply the top and the bottom by 10. Which would give my numerator 125 and my denominator 1,000. And then I want to reduce. So I can see I can reduce by 5 on the top and the bottom. And I would get 25 out of 200. I can reduce again by 5. I would get 5 out of 40. And I can reduce again to 1 out of 8. 1 out of 8 is less than 50%, which is a little bit closer to 0, which gives me my decimal of 12.5%.